Hello, business building warrior. If you're listening to this episode near the time when it first came out, hey, it's the weekend. Hope you're enjoying your weekend. And to help you make your weekend even more impactful for your business, we've compiled some great information from some recent conversations we've had with students in our community who are actively trying to build beautiful businesses through e-commerce. That's right. This is a podcast that's all about using the internet creatively to launch and grow the business of your dreams. And hundreds of our interview episodes, if you scroll back in time, are with the students who have followed our proven Amazon course strategies to do just that. They've built a beautiful business, and we talked to them about the road that they were on to get to that point. So you can go back and listen to some of those episodes if you'd like, scroll back in time. But today, what I have for you is, like I said, recent conversations with students from our community who are at all levels of experience. Because what we do every Monday around here, around 5 o'clock Eastern time, we've been doing it for a long time, is we go live on Zoom and anyone can join in and ask us anything about their business, about e-commerce, about our community, about our coaching program, about our courses, or about some challenges they're facing in their business. So these Saturday episodes are a nice random mix-up of conversational topics. We've done our best to break down a little bit about what you're about to experience in the description for today's episode, so you can check that out if you'd like. But it's going to be some really good people, some of your fellow business building warriors hopping on a live call with us, hanging out and having conversations with us. Most of our Saturday episodes, that's what we do. It's that recent recording. You'll also hear from time to time an older episode that we've revisited, pulled out some really good nuggets of information and broken it down into bite-sized pieces so you can take it along with you on the weekend, enjoy whatever it is that you're doing on Saturday or over the rest of the weekend, and then be ready to hit the week with some new energy and ideas and motivation because you hung out with your friends at Silent Sales Machine Radio and listened to some good inspiration. So thanks for being the best part of our show. We're honored that you spend some time listening to our show each week. And if you want to leave us a review, we'd certainly appreciate that. We'll jump over into the content in just a moment, but we love those iTunes 5-star reviews. We love those likes and those comments, all that stuff. It's so great. It helps us spread the word. We have no marketing budget for this show. It's all about you spreading the word. And we recently flew past 6 million downloads on iTunes alone because you do such a great job of telling others about silentjim.com. That's all you got to do. Send in there, say, hey, these guys know their stuff when it comes to e-commerce and selling online and Amazon. Go check out some of those shows. We appreciate when you do that. Thank you so much for that. Well, let's jump over and see what the team's put together for us today. Hey, business building warrior, welcome to Silent Sales Machine Radio, the home of all the hundreds of success stories that you've heard over the past few years from students of the Proven Amazon course. We've got thousands of success stories in our free Facebook group from students who have gone through our training, and we've interviewed hundreds of them on this show. And today is another great guest who's built a beautiful business. He used to be in the restaurant business, spent some time in ministry as well, and now full-time for the last year and a half, 2 years, he's been selling on Amazon. He's also developed into one of the great coaches on our team as well. You're about to meet Mr. Grant Douglas. Something else I can tell you about him is he's going to be one of the presenters at our upcoming Proven Conference. The website for details on that, you'll hear us talk about it as well today on the show, but the website is 3 words. Remember these 3 words, theprovenconference.com. There'll be a link in the show notes to that and everything else we talk about today. But let me tell you a little bit more about Grant's business before we jump in. We spent some time today talking about one of the most recent changes that we've seen as Amazon sellers, where the shipping plans have changed a bit. Some of the pricing has changed. Grant really breaks down what he's seeing. He's a high volume seller. He's doing 6 figures per month in his business. So he's shipping a lot of product. He's primarily FBA, which means he's sending his products to Amazon. He's primarily online arbitrage sourcing as well with our replens model, which means he's shopping online, retail stores that you and I are familiar with, sources his product online, brings it to his location. He used to use a prep center. We spent some time talking about why he transitioned and how that's going. Now he uses family. They send out one big shipment per week, a very unique arrangement I'd never actually heard before. And like I said, he's a great coach on our team as well. So lots of interesting topics to dive into. We spend some time talking about the contrast between a high volume, lower price model versus a high price, lower volume model. We teach both. We love both. We do both around here. Many of us do, my business included, embrace both models. But we talk about the difference between the two, who might be a good fit for each of them when you're starting out, that sort of thing. So, hey, Grant, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me back again.
Good to see you again, my friend. Eager to jump into your story again, and let's get everyone up to speed.
Yeah, so I started selling on Amazon back in February 2021. I was employed. It was, around COVID that time, I guess about a year after, and I was employed, but I knew I would be losing my job. So I had a friend that was selling on Amazon, doing mostly just the retail arbitrage, the clearance places, but having success with it. And so I was like, you know what? Like, I kind of like this working from home that we had during COVID, and I wanted to keep flexible schedule. My kids are young. They're 7, 5, and 2 now, but that youngest was on the way during that time. And it was one of those things of like, well, let me roll the dice and see what happens. And
Yeah. What was your job
um,
before you made the leap?
so I've been in restaurant management for a while, fast food management before that. I was in ministry for some of the time as well. So that's what my past work experience is. And I say that I've done a lot of jobs working with people. So the biggest adjustment for me with Amazon was having a community, or initially not having a community, being a ninja behind a computer screen all day by myself, and that trying to transition for me. So that was tough, but really I've had so many jobs and I like them all. There's ways to make any job fun if you have the right, mindset to it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was just curious your background, and I didn't realize that you'd been in a ministry role as well. It seems like we have quite a few of those in our community. People who use this as supplemental income for the ministry role. Wherever you'd like to go with the story, keep us going.
yeah, so ended up working for me. I was able to get full time income by it was August that I was my last week on the job, and then by September I was having full time income. Ever since then, this has been the sole source of income for my family. We do a few things on the side now. I do coach on the side for a little bit. My wife does the Amazon influencer program now, and there's a small amount of eBay and Walmart marketplace kind of mixed in there that's, I guess, slowly increasing, but really just selling on Amazon has provided for our family for a while. And I was on the podcast in summer 2022, and then I was doing, I guess, similar numbers to what I'm doing now, but how, like, the supply chain in 2021 and everything was so jacked up that there were a lot of opportunities then that I guess don't exist now, or at least there's different opportunities now. And so, even though I was having $100,000 a month months back in 2022, I sell probably 3% of the ASINs that I sold back then. I've had to constantly repivot, and now I feel like I do have just a much more stable online arbitrage replens model that it is a lot more consistent and doesn't really fluctuate much month to month. I can increase when I want to, dive in a little bit more, but really just online arbitrage is what I've been able to just double down on. It works better for me and my family, by being able to work some before the kids wake up, being able to work some after the kids go to bed, being able to work during school. If I personally was doing all retail arbitrage, you literally have to work the hours the stores are open, and it kind of
Right.
limits that flexibility. There's definitely some benefits with that too, but just what works for me and my family has been just that
Yeah.
flexibility of OA.
So it's still just you running the business then, or you have a team? What's your team look like?
Yeah, so I have one virtual assistant. He's been with me for a year and a half, almost. It'll be 2 years this summer. And I did have one VA for a year before that as well. and they do mostly sourcing for me. But as I've grown and as I've done coaching, it's a virtual assistant ends up being kind of just your everyday assistant, where if I have like coaching invoices that I give each week, and he does those for me. And when we send inventory to Amazon FBA, he helps with putting the shipment together and getting it on Inventory Lab. That's the software that I use to help list on Amazon. And so I'm able to send him like a 15-minute video of, these are my products, these are how many units I have. All right, go upload that for me. And he does that during the day, his time, while I'm sleeping. And the next morning, it's ready to go for me.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we do, you mentioned retail arbitrage, and I used to do quite a bit of it, going to stores, finding the replens there. And there's a lot of advantages, disadvantages to both RA, OA. We typically encourage people to do both if you can, but it doesn't have to be you shopping. And I'm not telling you this, Grant, you know this, but the listeners like, yeah, I don't have to go to stores either. Well, you don't have to necessarily. We've got currently, I think, 2 or 3 shoppers on our team that hit stores and find our that way. And it's just another way to expand, right? I mean, there's just so many different ways to do this business, though. But it sounds like you're 100% OA replens, correct?
Yeah, so I do a little bit of RA. There are a few stores, and it is nice where we know the aisles that our in-store replens are. And
right.
My wife has gone, my mother-in-law has gone before, and I just have to send her just a few pics and say, hey, grab any of this while you're there.
Yeah. Sure.
So yeah, it's
kind of how we roll too. We've got a shared spreadsheet, that our team, like anyone who's out, and we kind of get it memorized after a while, which ones we're grabbing.
So I have one virtual assistant, like I said, mostly sourcing, probably sources for 30 hours a week, does miscellaneous tasks for me for another 10 to 15. And then I do have prep help. So, my story is maybe a little bit different, where I started with a prep center, and it was where I sent things out to Oregon to a tax-free prep center. And, because the math there with that is that you can save in sales tax what you have a prep center do for you. So if you're in a state that you pay sales tax and you cannot get sales tax back in any way, and there's a lot of states that you can't,
right,
then it's just financially makes more sense to send those items that have a higher buy cost to a place like Oregon, where they'll charge you $1.50 a unit to prep it, but you would have been charged $2 in sales tax. And if right, that's the case, then you actually might have gotten some of your inventory prep for completely free, right? So I did that for a while. Once I hit a certain amount of units, it started to be a pretty big bill on the prep center. And it made me start to inquire about hey, what are some ways is there a way to get some of my sales tax back? And I know a lot of states you can't, like I said, but in my state I can. And it's incredibly complicated. I'm grateful that my virtual assistant does it for me, after learning it myself for a little bit. So we decided to do prep in-house because we started to lean in on the stores that we are tax exempt on. And then also, some of the other ones, we found a way to get reimbursed on most of them. And so that also combined with the fact that a lot of my family, I have 3 family members that are realtors. And in 2023, the real estate market kind of crashed a little bit, and their income decreased a little bit. And one of them was like, man, I think I have to go back, start working again. Talk to me about, they wanted to go to work at Kohl's. And I said, don't do that. Let me start sending more inventory here. And how about you start prepping for me?
Right.
And little by little, that changed into, let's get everything prepped by them. And so my family takes care of all of my poly bagging and stickering for me.
There's always new, interesting ways to do this business. And you kind of adapted around the space you have, the people you have available to you, the resources, that sort of thing. And here's another new way. Family drives in once a year, or once a week, and you're using an old hotel. And it's been converted to unusual office spaces as your center and central location. And I love that arrangement where your stuff is dropped off even when you guys aren't there throughout the week. And then you guys all go in and sort through it once a week. That's so cool. It's just creative.
I mean, lots of times I know there's this hesitation of when people, their house starts to get filled, and it's almost like the next step is I need to get a warehouse. The next step is I need to have this kind of standalone thing. And I quite frankly won't ever have one unless I have an employee that's paid to be there.
Mhm.
Because, how many times if back when you had a lot of stuff shipped to your house, how many times did you go out and run errands and you come home and there's a pile of boxes at your house and it's like, oh, I gotta put those in, right? Well, the last thing you want is a pile of boxes sitting on a busy highway or, with a bunch of other retail stuff next door or whatever it may be. And so it's just for us, it's just worked. So I encourage people like, hey, before you get a warehouse, like first, maybe let's optimize home a little bit, add some shelving in there,
Mhm.
get some better prep tables, and maybe hey, instead of doing shipments, maybe do shipments twice a week instead of once a week. Like, let's try to do some more things. And then also before you get a warehouse, like don't be afraid to look for just those doctor office type places that or or these rented out places that have like suites inside of suites because it's just kind of a step out you can take before making that bigger step of
Yeah.
having this huge amount of overhead
Committing
and
to a
these other
5-year
other
lease
things.
on a warehouse and, right.
Exactly. Like
Neighbors.
I get a yearly lease, and that's something I didn't even think about, but that's not something that most people, doing the volume that I do have. And so I'm
Yeah.
really grateful for it.
For business space, 1-year lease is very unusual. Yeah, typically 1 to 3 to 5 year. So there's a lot of little steps you can take in between having it in your bedroom versus a warehouse. Some of the more
Right. Yeah.
creative ones are, a handful of neighbors.
Mhm.
People.
Yeah, I've heard like different garages, some like me, you have that one neighbor that has that really nice 4-car standalone garage that they don't use for tools anymore, and that becomes your prep center.
Where else do you want to go? What else would you like to share from your story? How are you finding your inventory these days? You mentioned you have a significantly shorter list of ASINs. Like, how did you go from a large list to a short list while maintaining your numbers and profitability? Which I wouldn't mind hearing as well. However you want to represent that.
So I'd say not. I may have misspoke. I don't have a. I'm probably the opposite of. I'm trying to keep a long list of ASINs. Now I do lean into moving inventory faster, and selling a lot of units versus selling less. And so and I think the important thing here is we talk about like strategies of like how to move more inventory that it's all preference. This isn't a people are looking for a hey, which is right, which is wrong, which is best. And there's multiple best practices where you
Absolutely.
have on one hand, you buy just maybe 3 units of something and you send it and you have it really high, and across the month it sells 3 to 5 units and you keep that going and replenish. And then you also have the scenario of maybe you're sending in 10 and those 10 sell, and the next time you send in 20 and you keep trying to see like how much inventory can I turn. In this scenario your price is going to have to be a little bit lower. So, and for those that don't know what that is, of like when you place an order online, you have a couple options, whether it's a credit card that gets you anywhere from 1 to 3% cash back on any buy costs you make, or you have extensions like Rakuten and Be Frugal and Top Cash Back, and you get 1 to even upwards of 15% cash back on those. Well, the more you buy, the more that money is that comes in, and that's just extra gravy on top of profit you're already making. And so sometimes it makes sense to lean into that, and
Of
sometimes
course.
it makes sense to play the margin game and be a little safer and be up high, especially when testing too.
Yeah. In my general take on it, I've been pounding the drum pretty loud the last few months about, you know, playing above buy box as a viable strategy, not for everyone, but I think the person it makes the most sense for is the new seller who's tentative, nervous, limited funds, and
Mhm.
they really want proof of concept. And they're saying to themselves, I can't find anything profitable. Like, okay,
Right.
I've got something to show you. Do I see this as something you can do at scale? Probably not, although we're starting to see some pretty cool results with it. But
Mhm.
when you're buying 2 or 3 units at a time, for all the reasons you listed and several others, there's disadvantages to that. But it does completely minimize your risks. So it's the
Mhm.
maximum margin, minimum risk, highest odds of having proof of concept as fast as possible way to do replens. And of course, there's a whole bell curve there. But as you scale, obviously, it makes a lot more sense. I mean, you're getting bulk discounts. You order 30 units of something, you can pay less per unit than if you're ordering two or three, right? So you can really get up. And like you said, Amazon likes to see more transactions. They just
Mhm.
do. Your metrics look better. It's just a smoother way to run your business. But when you're first getting started out, especially, or when you're looking for ASIN, like, man, I just can't find anything. I love that above buy box. I'll stick a link in the show notes to the
Mhm.
conversation we've been having about that topic, above buy box.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think that is the negative of if you are looking for more volume is that it does tie up cash flow a little bit more, right? If I'm buying four times as much many units, then I have four times as much sitting at a warehouse. And
Mhm.
so that's a recognized risk with that or negative with that.
And if that ASIN
And
goes bad and you have to recall the inventory, instead of recalling 3 or 4 units, you're recalling 80 units. Or it's like,
right.
what are going to do with
And
these?
so that's not like you said a great approach for a brand new seller because you need to know which asins that you can. When you can see on Amazon, man, this one sells 500 times per month on Amazon based off all these metrics I'm seeing. You know what? Sending in 20 to 30 actually isn't that risky, right? Maybe there's just 10 sellers on there. You say, okay, that's actually not that risky. But as a new seller, you might be testing on something. Maybe it's in that drop range of like 30 to 40. It should sell, five, no problem. But 20 would be pushing it a little bit. And it's great for a new seller to, just send in those 3 to 5 unit test buys, see what price it sells at, send it in high. I always, when I send in my inventory, so like I said, my virtual assistant helps me with like loading everything to give to inventory lab before I send my inventory.
Right.
And so he will always send in at the buy box $5 above the buy box or $5 of what my current price is, whichever is higher. That's the price we send it in as. And if it's a replen. And then if it doesn't sell, once it's fully checked in, then you can start to lower it a little bit if needed. And I've honestly recently though, like, since you've been talking about the above the buy box approach, there's a few ASINs. What I've done is kind of looked at it in the reverse way, where there's some ASINs that I have been sending in a lot of, at the buy box, and I'm making good margins. I'm making good enough to of what makes sense for me. But then what I did was went to my repricer and I was like, let me bump up my repricer min $1. Okay, this was selling at $22.99 really well. Let me just see if I go to $23.99, how much volume am I losing? And I raised one up and I was like, okay, I'm not losing that much volume. Let me see. Okay, that works. And then it could be that when I raise it up to $25.99, maybe then the volume just goes away. It's a little bit too high for that listing, and I go back down to my other price. But that type of approach of when I send in now, I'm basically just finding out, does it sell? How fast does it sell? And did it sell? And then my secondary send in is when I'm really intentional about which approach do I want to take. Am I going to keep selling high slower, or am I going to sell within 3% of the buy box faster? And that's the beauty of it. And why it's so nuanced is that the answer is different for every single ASIN. If you have an ASIN, there's 5 sellers on, and you're the only FBA seller, you shouldn't sell at the buy box. You should sell higher. But if you're selling in an ASIN that is really popular, that has 50 sellers on it, 30 of them are FBA, you probably need to be a little closer to the buy box to get those sales. And there's tons of ASINs in between. And it just takes time to learn which ones it works better for and which ones it doesn't. I think perspective is important because so when my family comes and drives up and all 3 of them or 2 of them go into a Prius and drive up here to save on gas, I want them to be able to stay as long as possible. And they want to be able to stay as long as possible. So part of the reason why, again, I lean into, doing more units is because it means more work for them, which is more profit for me too. But I want to be able to pay them more so that they don't have to go work retail again. And so I aim for 10% margin, probably month to month. It's anywhere between 8 to 12% margin. That's before cash. So that's after I pay everything except for myself. And that's before cash back. So cash back would, again, add another 2-3 grand, I guess, to that per month. But for me, that's what I'm happy with, because it means, like I said, I can pay them more, and it satisfies what I need for my family.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think that
beautiful business, man. That's better money than some of it sounds like the other careers that you've had in the past. It sounds like at least twice what you were doing before with the
for
flexible
sure.
lifestyle. And you mentioned you guys homeschool, right? Didn't you?
So they're in a co-op. So there's a place they go 2 days a week,
Cool co-op.
but then we homeschool from there. So yeah, it helps for. I won't go back to working for anyone unless I have to,
Yeah.
just because of when you wake up and if you just need to take off for the day. Like I told you before, I had to get some stitches from bumping heads with somebody playing basketball
Yep.
not long ago, and I was able to after basketball. I was planning to work and I went home and I rested instead. And that's the case for anything. And it's not just me. Like if my kids are sick, if my wife needs a break, like she texted me today. I should ask if I could come home earlier. And so I said, yeah, I'll come home when we're done chatting here. And it works. It works so good doing that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what people sometimes miss is what that added flexibility and what that added. I think even what COVID taught us was that there's very few jobs that are guaranteed, no matter how big the company is, no matter how successful they are. If I was still in the restaurant business, I probably would have lost my job also,
Mhm.
just during that time, or at least I would have lost a lot of hours.
Mhm.
And I think in the end of the day, my wife and I have decided like we're going to bet on ourselves, and we're going to bet on our business, and we're going to put our livelihood in our hands as much as we can. Definitely, Amazon plays a role in that too, but everything apart from Amazon, it lies in our hands. And so we're more than happy to, even if the money was maybe a little bit less than if I went to the corporate world and worked 50, 60 hours a week, even still, I would still do a version of what I do now, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I've said this, I started saying it a decade ago. I've been doing that. That's been my reality for over 20 years at this point. We homeschool our whole crew all the way up. Now 3 of them are married and 2 of them, I got 2 left at home. But this
Mhm.
is how we did life for 20 years. And I started saying about 10 plus years or so ago that if someone had slid a blank piece of paper to me and said, write any number you want, that is your annual salary. I don't care what the number is. But you've got to get up every day, let's say, 5, 6 a.m. You're not going to be home till 7 or 8.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's your new reality. I would have refused it for all the benefits that you've listed and more. Like, our kids are friends and I know them and I know them well and they know me well.
Mhm.
One of my sons asked me to be his best man at his wedding. Like there's time for relationships. I
Right.
get to see them under the same roof, turn from little kids into young adults that are living great lives. And we got to put our values into them and have in depth conversations in the middle of the day while we're slapping
Yeah.
stickers on bags, maybe, right? Just that whole experience. And I'm not saying that's the one right way to do family. Of course, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that's what our family experienced. And I wouldn't have traded it for the world. And if other people want that, I'd love to help them make that happen, not to make anyone feel guilty, and anytime I say this, I always say, there's parents out there doing what they got to do to make ends meet, to pay the bills. God bless you. We're in your corner. We're
Mhm.
huge fans. I get it. But man, just to have these other opportunities and options on the table and validated by hundreds of people in our community who are making it happen and the trends are in our favor.
So let me start with the story. You probably know this is a tiny little parable. You probably know this one, but have you ever heard the one of the Chinese farmer before?
I don't know. Get it started. I'll tell you. I
It'll
heard a
it'll
lot of
ring a
them
bell.
Chinese farmers.
So let's say there's this Chinese farmer, and he has horses, and one of his horses run away, and his neighbors come up to him and they say, "Hey man, I'm so sorry. That's awful." And he says, "Maybe." Then the next day, the horse comes back. A whole bunch of horses come with him, and so now instead of his five, he has an initial five more too. So he has 10. His neighbors come over. They say,
That's
"Hey,
great news.
hey, I'm so happy. That's great." He
And
says,
he says, maybe.
"Maybe."
Yeah, keep it going. I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Next day, the horse, one of the new horses, wild horses, it breaks his son leg. Neighbors come over. Hey, I'm so sorry. Like, that's awful that happened to you. Maybe. And the next day, and the story goes on and on, right? And so the point of that story is that we don't always know how something's going to shake out because we don't have foresight. We can guess. And something that's a temporary, negative thing can be a long term, really positive thing.
Yeah.
And
There's a
and
Hebrew
so
principle, not to interrupt you, but the
yeah.
Hebrew principle there is anytime you meet opposition, there's always opportunity.
Mhm.
Every single time there's opportunity in opposition. which is another way to translate that parable. It's like, son broke his leg. Well, that protected him from having to go off to battle, if I remember correctly, or something like
Yeah,
that.
the army recruiter came or whatever, and
Right,
he didn't have
exactly.
to.
And, you just never know. Even those points of opposition turn into opportunity if you stay creative. It's all about the mindset ultimately, and how you. And I would even push back. One of the things I say is, if you've got a community and you built relationships, every single point of opposition you're going to encounter in e-commerce, without exception, has multiple ways to pivot and turn it into opportunity every single time.